I am officially bulletproofed. Yes, that's why my skin is glowing and I'm looking ripped and jacked. It's because every morning I take my mycotoxin-free bulletproof coffee and mix it up with MCT oil and grass-fed butter. Why, do you ask? Well, it does a lot of things. It replaces my meal for the morning, and it gets my brain all the right nutrients they need. Those oils, that fat, and then I don't eat until 1 or 2 o'clock. So it's not really just coffee. It's turning into a lifestyle. A year ago, you had a fight scheduled with Sheila Gaff, right? And you were a very big proponent of the VADA testing and the drug testing, and that fight never happened. Mm-hmm. And people have different theories on that. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if you could talk about your whole mentality of having VADA involved, and then how you think that affects the sport right now as far as drug testing and everything.
I think a lot of sports have issues with drugs in sport. I think. The problem is when there's a big incentive to be the best in the world, or to be one of the best in the world, then people are going to do what it takes, within what they think they can get away with. And I think it puts people in a very difficult position, I think, when the possibility of taking drugs is there. Whether that's because there's no drug testing or because the drug testing is, for whatever reason, not at a level to discourage that kind of use. So it gives people a big dilemma. It's like, if you feel like all your competitors are using drugs, then what do you do? Do you tell yourself, I'd only be leveling the playing field, and do it as well, or do you not do it and then maybe not get as far in that sport as you would otherwise? So I think it's particularly an issue in combat sports where one person's actually trying to do damage to another person. It's a bit different in in athletics or swimming or cycling, where you're competing to be the fastest. I think it's still a big issue when you've got careers and money on the line. I don't think it's not negligible by any means. But I think in mixed martial arts it does raise an extra issue there.
Are you happy with what the UFC does right now, as far as their drug testing?
As I understand it, most of the drug testing the UFC is run by the athletic commissions in the US. And my personal feeling is that they could be doing more.
Right.
That's my personal feeling. I don't want to get into the politics of it or anything like that, but I think the problem is at the moment it's largely done with in-competition testing. They'll test you immediately after the event, and
they're doing some out of competition testing. That's how they got
some of the states are moving in that direction, which I think is a good thing.
But it's not consistent from state to state.
This is it. You've got wildly different standards from one state to another. I think there was a female fighter who tested positive. This wasn't the UFC. This was a local promotion. I think who tested positive. I think it was in Ohio. It's the second time she's tested positive, and they gave her a 6-month ban and they fined her $500, I believe. And you look at that and you think, well, why bother testing at all if that's what you're going to do?
You're saying it's not enough.
I think that's not going to discourage anyone from using drugs.
Usually they're banning the male fighters like 1 year, like the Chael Sonnens and stuff, usually out for a year.
I think, again, the problem is there's no consistency. There's from one state to another, from one situation to another. So I think that makes it very difficult, because at the moment I don't feel like there's a real disincentive for fighters to use drugs. I think, a rational person looking at the situation could quite easily come to the conclusion that it's worth their while taking that risk.
Right. Do you ever think that there will be a sport or an Olympics or anything where drugs will be allowed, where people will be able to make themselves the best athletes they can be?
It's called pride, wasn't it?
Well, there's strongman, there's sports where this sort of thing goes on, or it's, if not openly acknowledged, then at least tacitly condoned.
Cycling was the big, obvious one. People talked about it for years, and Yet I believed Lance Armstrong when he said he was not taking it, and I still believed him until a few years ago.
Yeah.
But then you have to sort of feel sorry, for from sort of being the sacrificial lamb, where and everybody turns around, oh, that's terrible. But it really was in fact leveling the playing field. I think.
And again, I mean, there is a lot of that goes on, in MMA as well. I think there's every so often somebody tests positive, and everyone jumps on their case and, oh, isn't this terrible? And they're the devil. And I think, and you got to think, well, there's an awful lot of people who are doing just the same thing but not getting caught.
Yeah.
What is it then that is the defining characteristic of a substance that's legal and not legal? I mean, because if one of my athletes comes in and says, oh, I'm not taking my glutamine, I'm not taking my fish oils, I'm not taking my zinc, I say, you're crazy. What are you doing? That just seems like good common sense. But then, what is there like a chemical definition?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with most sports, you look at the World Anti-Doping Association. They have a banned list. If it's on the banned list, then you can't take it.
How does it get on there? Is the question?
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting question. I mean,
and that includes marijuana metabolites now.
I mean, I think as I understand it, and again I may be wrong here. I believe the criteria are, one, it's got a potential for abuse, and two, it's got the potential to be harmful or dangerous if abused. I think that's what they're looking at. So I mean, like you say, there's a lot of things that people take. I mean, caffeine used to be a restricted substance on the WADA banned list until I think it was about 2004 when they took it off, because I think there was a thought that it may be dangerous if used in performance-enhancing quantities. But then I'm not sure exactly why. I think maybe some further studies were done or something like that, and people decided that actually we're not that worried about this. Go ahead, take what you like, with regard to caffeine. So, I mean, there is that ongoing debate as to what should or shouldn't be on the banned list. But I think ultimately, once you have a list of substances, that's your definition.
Yeah, but it seems very arbitrary, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, and to some degree, I think there is an element of arbitrariness. I think at some point somebody has to decide, is that going to be on or off? But I mean, it's codified in the rules of the sport. I mean, it's no more arbitrary than saying you can't kick people in the head on the ground, for example.
Sure.
I mean, that's an arbitrary rule, but it's in the rules. Or you can't grab the cage, or 12 to 6 elbows, or any of these other things which are pretty arbitrary when it comes down to it. And there may be a rationale for having them in there at some point, and you could argue about whether they should be or shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, I think you go by the rules as they're written, not as you think they should be. You don't kick people in the head on the ground and then argue, oh, well, it's not really any different from kicking them in the head on the feet. It's like it's illegal, so you don't do it. And I think that's how you have to look at it with banned substances.
It's going to be interesting over the next 5-10 years where you start getting all this crazy technology coming in, whether it's stem cell research or gene therapy, or people say there's blood doping going on in the UFC, and that would be very hard to test for. And then also about the growth hormone is hard without a blood test. There's things like modafinil, which is like a narcolepsy drug that Tim Ferriss is saying that Usain Bolt takes just to be faster for the 100-yard dash. So
I think it is a very difficult problem, and I'm not sure there's any very easy answers. I think, you can certainly make it a lot harder for people to abuse steroids or other performance-enhancing drugs. I think if you do proper random out-of-competition testing, the sort of testing where somebody shows up on your doorstep unannounced.
Right.
This is the sort of testing
like
that VADA do as well. You give them your address, you let them know where you're going to be, and somebody will show up without telling you in advance, and will take a urine and blood sample there.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I think personally, it's not an issue for me, but I find that intrusive. I don't think I would appreciate living my life like that. And I get maybe perhaps the necessity of it, but I don't think that would be worth it for me to have feel like I was being policed.
I can see where people are coming from on that. For me, the benefits of knowing that everyone else is doing that as well outweighs the cost of a bit of personal inconvenience.
Right.
So that's my take on it. I'd rather have it knowing that all my opponents are being tested too, I mean, I suppose that's the price you pay, you know. Or I mean, you could go the other way and say, we don't care, everything's legal, take what you like. I think personally, I'm not a fan of that approach, but I think at least that would be consistent. That would be honest. You know, I think the problem is when you have a situation where on paper things are illegal, but everyone knows that stuff goes on. I think that's the worst of both possible worlds. You know, I think that makes it very difficult.
Kind of like what the Tour de France was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who suffer in that situation are the fighters, because they're put in that position of having to say, well, do I or don't I?
Yeah.
And you know, if a fighter in that situation makes a decision, well, I'm going to take drugs, and then they get caught, nobody's going to back them up on it. You know, nobody's going to say, oh, well, everyone else was doing it. You know, they're on their own, and they pay the cost for it. So, you know, like I said, I think I would like to see things go one way or the other. You know, I mean, ideally, I would like to see a better standard of testing. And I mean, I think a combination of making it more likely that they're going to catch people, and also tougher penalties when people do get caught. You know, I think that would discourage a lot of people from
doing it. Yeah.
Doing it. Yeah.
You got anything to add to that?
I watched the documentary when I was in Russia. The only channel that was in English was the BBC. So they had this BBC documentary. It was really good. It was about the evolution of sprinting, you know, and they showed like how technique changed and stuff like that, and times kept going up because they changed the surface, and you know, times skyrocketed up, and then guys started figuring out how to lean on time to get a couple of extra seconds. You know, it really made big differences. And then there was another point in time, I don't know exactly when it was, but within sort of more recent history, where all of a sudden all the times skyrocketed again, and they were all guys from Jamaica, all from the same coach, all from the same team, you know, and they had all these like, I can forget who it was, you know, but serious athletes sitting there going, yeah, well, you know, Jamaicans are very relaxed, so I think they just chill out at big events, and you know. Oh, you know, come on, Jamaicans are relaxed, so they're shaving, previously unheard of milliseconds off the times. No, it's absurd, you know. Like personally, I'm for transparency. You know, I think it would make it a lot easier for everybody. But that's just me.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we'll leave it at that.